Okay, Duncan, we're going to talk about starting the car. Before starting the car, there are two very important things you need to check. One is the oil level, check that every single day. And two is the coolant level, check that every single day too. The oil level you'll find down on the right-hand side of the car. So if you come down, you've got to get down on your knees here. Get down under the car. You'll see underneath the car is a sight glass. If you look under the right side, you'll see what's called a sight glass. That sight glass tells you how much oil there is, and you can see there are two yellow lines on the sight glass. The absolute minimum amount of oil is the bottom yellow line, but that's really too low. The best place is for it sitting just at the top line. Here you can see it's above the top line. That's about 1 quart more than the top line. For this car, that's actually correct. This car is slightly different than the people who made the sight glass. But really, anything from halfway between those two yellow lines up to where you see it now would be correct. Or if it's not fine, you fill the oil where I showed you inside the engine compartment on this side. Ask for help if you need it. You come to check the coolant level. Now the mascot is the radiator cap. You might remember to open the hood, you turn the mascot sideways so that the wings can clear. However, to check the coolant, you've got to take the whole thing off. So you grab it by the base here and simply unscrew the whole thing. And be a little bit careful because when it gets to its last thread or so, it's going to want to fly off and dent everything. So keep your hand on it, lift it off, and then you've got to check the coolant level by looking inside. You can see this coolant there, and if you see what looks like on the top of the screen, I don't know that I can get my finger in there, let me try. This, it's a projection inside the radiator. Coolant should be about halfway up that or so, just as you see it here. It's round. So if the coolant was lower, you'd see a big round thing. Coolant at the bottom of that is okay, but the best is about where you see it, about 1/3 to halfway up. And that'll be fine. And if you remember from what you asked me online, if you need to fill up, use plain water. Don't use a coolant you buy. Now, for actually starting the car, there are 3 important things you have to do. The first is to check that the petrol filler is closed. This is the petrol. We're on the right side of the car. The petrol filler, because it's a pressure-fed system, some people vent the tank and they open it so the pressure can get out. It's not necessary to do that. You can simply leave it always closed. I'm taking it off now so you can see how it goes on, which might seem silly, but it's not. When you obviously fill up in there, and there's the gauge, incidentally. Right now it's reading almost full. There's no gauge on the dashboard. So when you put this back off on this top screw a little bit, then screw the cap down. And you can see, there we go. Screw it all the way, the bottom one, all the way down, just as I'm doing. And tighten that as best you can. There we go. And then screw the top one down. This is to ensure a good seal so that it doesn't leak pressure. So they are both tight. Excellent. Next thing you've done, remember you've checked water and oil. Next thing you do is turn the power on. Down is on, up is off. You could always check by trying to turn headlights on. If they don't come on, it's off. So you press it down. This is a safety switch, as we discussed online. Always turn that off when you stop the car, always. And then almost right next to it is the carburetor switch. You see there's a little lever, and it says here off, and it says here on. Obviously you're going to be driving, so you turn it to on. When you're finished, you should turn it to off as well. Again, it's just a safety feature, but driving is always on. Okay, Duncan, now we're going to go through the starting procedure. I'm going to do it as a dry run first without actually starting the car because I fear once the engine starts you won't hear what I'm saying. So in order to start the car, there's several things we have to do. First and foremost, we have to pressurize the fuel tank. You might remember from a previous video there was a big thing on the left side of the dashboard. This is an air pump. You unscrew it until it's loose, see, and then you start to pump it. And while pumping it, you look at the fuel pressure gauge, which is over there, and you can see that the pressure is starting to move. And we get that up to 2 pounds of pressure. The other guys will tell you less. This car likes 2 pounds of pressure. So we keep pumping until it's about 2 pounds of pressure, which it is about now. Then once you've done that, you screw this back into place to lock it in position. So we have fuel pressure. The next thing you do is turn on the ignition. You might remember I said all the way to double, so that's all the way on. Then we set the controls. We set the throttle, which is this one on the left, up to about halfway. We set the carburetor mix all the way to the right, literally all the way to the right, and we leave this fully retarded. Very important. Then the next step we'll do, which I won't do this very second, is press the starter button, which is actually on the floorboard. My foot is covering it over here. I don't know how much light there is in there. You can see I'm moving my foot in and out. There's the button there. It'll be pretty obvious to you. Obviously you check that the car is in neutral and you press the starter button. Once the engine fires, what you do is take the carburetor lever, move it about 1 or 2 notches to the left so it's not too rich. And then after that, move your ignition timing up to the advanced or running position. And let the car warm up like this for several minutes. Once it's warmed up a little bit, start to bring the throttle down until it holds it at about 1 notch above the S in slow. And this will be your running position for your throttle and your ignition timing. As the car warms up a little bit more and you get going, move the carburetor back to the central position. And this then will be your driving position. These two arms opposite like that, and this center. If you're going up hills, you might find the car needs a little bit more power. Simply richen the mixture by 2 notches. Then when you've climbed the hill, put it back to center. It's important when you start the car that you have a look to see that the fuel pressure has, the oil pressure has come up. Right now it hasn't because we haven't started the car, but we'll start it in a minute. So let's go ahead and do all of that. I'm going to put everything back the way you would leave it when you park. When you park, you leave it like this so that you don't make a mistake. Always the levers to center. Everything is off. So let's go ahead and do that. I've already pumped the fuel pressure. Start, put the ignition switch up. Open the throttle. Reach in the mixture. Ensure this is retarded. My foot is now going to start the car. I'm going to slightly open that by 2 notches. I'm going to move that up to there. Having a look at the oil pressure. Oil pressure has come up. As the car warms up, we can slowly bring this back. Now you'd let the car warm up a little bit, and as the car warms up, you'll be able to get this idle down lower, and you'll be able to move this to the center. This is a little bit soon, but that's what you would do. And that's how you would run. When it's time to stop the car, you stop the car, retard the ignition, and reach in and turn it off. And the car will stop. So again, this is where you would be running if you're actually running the car. When it's time to stop the car, retard the ignition, turn it off. Now I have left in the car for you a check sheet that tells you how to do all of this. It's going to be hanging inside the car, and you should be fine. I hope all that's clear. And then once you've shut down the car, come out or back on the outside and turn the carburetor to off. Turn the power, the battery off. And as I said, some people will vent the tank. I sometimes do, I sometimes don't. I think you probably shouldn't, that way you won't forget about it. Anyway, that's what it is. And then turn off your indicators. As I said, I've left a check sheet inside the car.